You mentioned Michael Cohen there, that this was something coming soon to Donald Trump. Now, obviously, the question is what's going to happen next. We're told that the former president is about to issue a statement. They're working that out. We'll bring that to you as soon as we have it. But to John Carl's question and point earlier about the process for Donald Trump to come to New York, David, he wants to come to New York. Everything we have been told is that the former president wants this moment. And you heard Aaron Katersky there talking about mugshots. One of Trump's closest allies said to me over the weekend, please let there be a mugshot. We want to put it on a T-shirt. It'll be part of our campaign ensemble as we look to 2024. So as many people might think, and there's been some speculation Donald Trump was dreading this day, I think that's a little bit true, David. I mean, nobody wants to go to criminal court, but there is a part of Donald Trump that sees this as a big boon for his new presidential campaign.
He's going to try to use this as a political weapon, obviously, as John Carl has pointed out. John Santucci, our thanks to you. John Carl pointing out that he continues to run for president and is the front runner on the Republican side in so many of the polls. Rachel Scott, who is already covering the race for the White House, was in Waco, Texas, and heard firsthand at that rally how the former president has turned these investigations into an important part of his campaign message.
Exactly, David. He really leaned into his legal troubles at that rally in Waco, his first really major presidential rally of the 2024 presidential cycle. He called it the central issue of our time, the weaponization of our justice system. And he brushed off any concern about these investigations, dismissing them as a witch hunt, calling it one phony investigation after another. And David, we are starting to see some reaction coming from Republicans over on Capitol Hill. Congressman Jim Bakes from Indiana calling this political prosecution. Congressman Ralph Norman tweeting, this isn't about justice or rule of law, it's just about optics of an indictment. We have not heard yet from House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, but in the lead up to a possible indictment, he was pressed about this repeatedly on Capitol Hill. He also dismissed this, saying that it was a political game being played, David.
Rachel Scott in Washington. Rachel, thank you. I want to bring in Stephanie Ramos at the White House. We know President Biden has not officially declared that he's running for re-election, though very much looks like the candidate, and told me that he does intend to run. Just hasn't officially announced it yet. Knows that he could very well face Donald Trump again in another matchup leading up to the 2024 election. And Stephanie, any reaction from the White House tonight to this indictment?
Not yet, David. The White House has not yet commented on this news. Overall, the White House has stayed largely away from commenting on this. When asked, they've said they will not weigh in on ongoing investigations. When asked if President Biden believed it was okay for someone who's been indicted to run for president, they've said that they could not engage because of the Hatch Act. Now, typically in a re-election year, you know this, David, it is common for someone to highlight the weaknesses of their opponent, but this is a tricky situation for President Biden, since anything he says on this case could have implications for any federal cases against former President Trump. Now, it could also be seen as political if the president were to be seen as celebrating Trump's indictment. But as far as the White House reacting to this news tonight, they have made no comment just yet.
Stephanie Ramos at the White House tonight. Stephanie, thank you. And for those of you who are just tuning in, many of you likely looking for your local news, we will be joining your local news shortly, but we continue to cover the breaking news at this hour. A Manhattan grand jury has handed up an indictment. That means former President Donald Trump will, in fact, be criminally charged in the hush money case. I do want to bring in Pierre Thomas, our Chief Justice Correspondent, on two key questions moving forward here, Pierre. First of all, with relation to this case right here in New York, there have been calls for protests. We've heard that from the former president again. We've heard leaders really on both sides of the aisle say, in essence, do not protest. We are not going to see what we have seen in our country before. Even the Republican leader, the Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, has urged people not to protest this decision if and when it comes. Now it has in fact come, but we know that there is stepped up security here in New York and beyond because of this.
Absolutely, David. Law enforcement officials, particularly at the federal level, have been loath to comment much at all about the situation unfolding in Manhattan. Suffice it to say, they are very aware of what happened on January 6th, and those statements by former President Trump about death and destruction did not go unnoticed. They have facts in the past that suggest that there might be people that would act out on behalf of the president, angry about what he is about to undertake. So law enforcement officials, I think we can expect to see in New York and other locations, including here in Washington, will be on alert. I know from sources that I've talked to that they've been really mining the intelligence, listening for information from that part of the world that generated to January 6th to see if there's anything specific. I was told last week, David, that they had uncovered no specific allegation of a direct threat of violence, but it's something they're very concerned about, David.
Now, on the second question for you, Pierre, the special counsel's investigation that is ongoing, obviously, as this investigation in New York was as well. Jack Smith looking into two separate cases here. Obviously, the events leading up and including January 6th, and also the discovery of classified documents at Mar-a-Lago. We've seen indication in recent days that that investigation has in fact ramped up. So we're looking at this case and potentially two more investigations involving the special counsel and the investigation in Georgia.
Absolutely. And I know from sources directly that one of the reasons why Merrick Garland chose Jack Smith is that he was known as being extremely aggressive. You've seen in recent weeks through the reporting of our investigative team that he's been pushing on the issue of executive privilege. He wants to get answers from the people closest to President Trump so that he can figure out what, if anything, he should do in terms of these cases. Now, I'm being told that the issue of fraud and the fake electors is of high interest to Special Counsel Smith. Also, this whole issue of, how state officials were contacted, who was doing it on the president's behalf, what did he know about that? So that is very much being pursued aggressively. That said, they are keeping it totally separate from what's happening in the District of New York in terms of the Manhattan District Attorney, because they know that they cannot be seen as playing politics. It's something, David, that people here are particularly concerned about, so they're trying to do all their talking in court at present.
There have been so many questions, Pierre, or thanks to you, so many questions about whether there would be any sort of, not official coordination, but any coordination between these investigations. There had been some talk, as we heard from John Santucci earlier, that a decision to in fact vote this grand jury might be delayed until after perhaps the Easter holiday, that this would be weeks from now. Instead, word coming late this afternoon that the grand jury did vote this afternoon. They voted to indict the former president. Again, the history made as we now approach 6 o'clock here in the East, involving a former president the first time. A former president has been criminally charged in this country. And John Santucci, I want to bring it back to you because you've learned that the Secret Service has now been in touch with members of Trump's team.
Trump's team has made proactive calls to the Secret Service, David, trying to figure out what exactly this would look like. And it's twofold, right? It's the security around Mar-a-Lago. It is an island. It is a complex. There is only one bridge to get there. So that is concern number one. And then it's obviously the concern of getting him up to New York. Look, as Aaron was talking about earlier, bike racks, they are the new thing surrounding the DA's office in Lower Manhattan. I can tell you from just walking around Trump Tower in Midtown earlier this week, the racks are back, the cinder blocks are there. It looks as though it was the days when Donald Trump, frankly, had a different address at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. But for the moment, we don't know when this trip would be to New York. We had heard weeks ago that it would be a process. It would be several days. We wouldn't expect to see Donald Trump in New York the day after word of an indictment. Obviously, we are checking that. We're not sure. But it's going to be a process to physically bring him here. And what does that look like as far as the courtroom? And you have to remember, too, David, though it would be Donald Trump's arraignment, there's other business in criminal court. There are other criminals, frankly, in criminal court. So actually sealing off the building for the former president's protection, as he is a Secret Service protectee, is going to be a high priority both for the Secret Service and NYPD.
John Santucci with us here. Aaron Katersky, I want to go back to you down in Lower Manhattan. And Aaron, to get to John's point earlier about what this could look like, what are your sources inside the DA's office telling you about potentially what Americans would see unfold here when the former president is brought to Manhattan?
When that happens, David, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and former President Trump's legal team will have choreographed the whole thing, and those conversations will be ongoing. No arraignment date has yet been set, according to a court official I just spoke with, and he says that's going to be up to them, to the DA's office and to the former president's attorneys to negotiate. Once he is here, whether there's a camera in court, that's up to the judge in New York State Court, and that can be a game time decision. But everything that happens will undoubtedly be highly choreographed. We don't yet know what the charges are. Those will not be unsealed until Trump appears here at court. But we know the grand jury had been examining evidence of Trump's alleged role in falsifying business records of his company when, as Michael Cohen, his former fixer, has said, he accounted for the payment to Stormy Daniels as a routine legal expense. And prosecutors have been examining, and the grand jury's been examining, whether the true intent was not a routine legal expense, but to protect his campaign chances. Stormy Daniels alleged that she had an affair with Donald Trump back in 2010, which she has long denied, but she wasn't paid until the closing weeks of the 2016 presidential campaign. And Cohen has suggested that Trump was thinking about his election chances and nothing else. Trump has said that he was trying to protect his family from an extortion. So this is by no means an open and shut case, David, but the very first step will be to get Trump here for his arraignment, and no date has yet been set.
Very clear that it is not an open and shut case. In fact, it could very well be a difficult case to prosecute, Aaron, as you know, and to prosecute this on the state level and to potentially try to connect this to federal election law would be, again, something that's been untested so far.
It's never happened before to see whether a top charge of falsifying business records, ordinarily a misdemeanor, could be elevated to a felony based on a federal crime. That could be the legal theory. There could be other legal theories that the Manhattan District Attorney's Office is working with. They have not said, and they're not commenting tonight, David.
Ken Nowday with us, an ABC News contributor as well, legal contributor, once worked in the DA's office. Our thanks to Aaron there. Aaron, thank you. We'll see you on World News Tonight a short time from now. In the meantime, Ken, what can you tell us about the risk the DA takes in pushing forward with this case, getting the indictment that he had hoped to get? Obviously, we don't know what the charges are inside that indictment. We knew that this had sat in the DA's office for many years, ramped up, obviously, in these recent months, as we've all reported on, and now the indictment. But the real test comes in actually prosecuting this.
And you're absolutely right, David, that this is a tough case for Alvin Bragg and the DA's office for the reasons that other people have said. This is a novel, very novel theory of criminal liability because you're tying this state crime of falsifying business records with election fraud, essentially. And something to note is the Southern District of New York, my former office, looked at this case and looked at the hush money payments case and took a pass on it. And Alvin Bragg used to be a prosecutor at the Southern District of New York. I worked with him. And now they have taken a second look and they thought that it's good enough to bring. So it's something to ask yourself. It's going to be difficult just by that mere fact that someone else had looked at this and decided maybe not to go forward.
Ken Nowday, thank you so much, Ken. Again, we can't underscore here the challenge that lies ahead, really, on both sides of this case, particularly for the prosecutor in uncharted territory. Ken, thank you. I do want to bring in our other contributors as well. Rick Klein, our political director here. And Rick, the question a lot of people at home are going to ask, and obviously this is something we have never seen before, so we're watching it play out in real time. But there is nothing that says a former president or a candidate, for that matter, who's been criminally charged can't continue to plow forward with a race for president.
That's 100% correct, David. In fact, someone could presumably even campaign from a jail cell if he or she is imprisoned, and certainly in an active investigation, in the middle of a trial. None of that would disqualify Donald Trump from running for office. So he could pursue that as he says he would. And there's a conventional wisdom that's been developing in Republican circles that this indictment might help him politically because it feels like he's being targeted all over again. But I'll tell you, in talking to campaigns in waiting on the Republican side, there's a lot of questioning around that notion. A lot of people on the Republican side who will say, yes, this prosecution may be politically motivated, but may also begin to make the case that all the weariness around Donald Trump, enough is enough. And that just this adding to the sense and the whiff of scandal around him, this comes at a very interesting point in the developing 2024 race. A lot of candidates still on the sidelines, including major challengers like Governor Ron DeSantis. But people like DeSantis have said, look, I'm not going to talk about this, and I do think it may be politically motivated, but I want people to recognize that all of this is about hush money to porn stars. Just a little reminder of what's at the root of this and what could be a political liability down the road as this campaign develops.
All right, Rick Klein, our political director. Rick, thank you. Perhaps one of the first reactions from the former president himself is just into ABC News. John Santucci, what has the former president told you?
David, I just hung up with the former president. He tells me that he just learned of the news, said it's an attack on our country, said it's political persecution. He went on to say, David, they are trying to impact an election. I asked the former president, does he plan to turn himself in? David, he said, you take care, John, and then he hung up on me. So I think we're going to have to wait and see. But obviously, all of our reporting has been that the former president does indeed intend to head to New York. Maybe didn't want to give me that piece of information just yet from him, but something that we know his team has been in active conversations right now with the Secret Service of what that is going to look like.
All right, John Santucci, our thanks for your reporting. Again, the former President Donald Trump telling John just moments ago they are trying to impact an election. As the former president now runs for the White House again, unclear again when he will come to surrender to the charges. Here in New York City, a Manhattan grand jury voting to indict the former president just a short time ago. Breaking the news right here. He will be criminally charged. Of course, the first time we have seen this play out in our country before. Our coverage will continue on ABC News Live. Of course, the entire team, as you have seen right here, working hard to report this out. We'll have team coverage on World News Tonight just about 21 minutes from now. In the meantime, we turn to your local news, and I'll see you shortly. Until then, good day.
This has been a special report from ABC News.